The Jeffersons showed us success, family, and laughter inside a New York high-rise. But behind that warmth, the cast's real lives took shocking turns. Aging, illness, loss, and survival reshaped these familiar faces in ways no one expected. And once you see it, you won't unsee it. Isabel Sanford as Louise "Wheezy" Jefferson. Isabel Sanford was born on August 29, 1917, in Harlem, New York. At 58 years old, she played Louise "Wheezy" Jefferson, the steady, morally grounded wife and emotional anchor in The Jeffersons. That quiet strength gave the series its emotional balance, grounding social satire in lived-in dignity and making Wheezy the heart audiences trusted. That sense of steadiness was hard-earned. Sanford married William Edward "Sonny" Richmond in 1945, and together they had 3 children, Sanford Kay, Eric, and Pamela. But as her work expanded from New York theater to screen roles, tension followed her home. After their separation in 1960 and Richmond's death later that year, Sanford moved to Los Angeles and raised her children alone, continuing to work while navigating grief, responsibility, and the pressure to remain dependable, much like the woman she would later portray. Even as professional recognition grew, her health began to narrow her world. In September 2003, Sanford underwent preventive carotid artery surgery, after which her cardiovascular condition declined steadily. During these years, her earlier work, such as her breakthrough dramatic performance in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, stood as proof that her success had never relied on comedy alone, but on emotional control forged through endurance. Sadly, she died on July 9, 2004, at 86, from cardiac arrest related to chronic heart disease, 5 days after being hospitalized at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Sanford was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Hollywood Hills, leaving an estimated $2 million net worth accumulated primarily through long-term television work, quiet financial stability that reflected a career built on consistency rather than spectacle. Mike Evans as Lionel Jefferson. Mike Evans was born on November 3, 1949, in Salisbury, North Carolina. At 26 years old, he played Lionel Jefferson, the measured, intelligent son who bridged generations in The Jeffersons. Lionel's restraint tempered conflict, giving the series a thoughtful counterweight to its louder personalities. That balance was tested by ambition. Evans never married, but he was a devoted father to 2 daughters, Carlena and Tammy, while splitting focus between acting and writing. Co-creating Good Times expanded his influence behind the scenes, yet the workload pulled him away from Lionel, leading to exits and returns that mirrored a career in flux. Illness later narrowed his options. Evans was diagnosed with throat cancer, a disease that progressed quietly as he stepped back from television and redirected energy into Southern California real estate, choosing stability over visibility as treatment advanced. Finally, he died on December 14, 2006, at 57, at his mother's home in 29 Palms, California, from throat cancer. Evans was cremated, leaving an estimated $1 million net worth built from television success, writing credits, and property, resources secured early, then protected when health demanded retreat. Sherman Hemsley as George Jefferson. Sherman Hemsley was born on February 1, 1938, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At 37 years old, he played George Jefferson, the loud, confrontational patriarch whose ambition drove the show's tension and humor in The Jeffersons. His sharp delivery and relentless energy turned conflict into momentum, shaping the rhythm of the series itself. Away from the set, Hemsley lived with deliberate distance. He never married, had no children, and kept his personal life sealed even as his career expanded from Broadway acclaim to television prominence. His continued work, later including a long run as a preacher in Amen, reflected discipline and control, a contrast to the chaos his most famous character projected. That privacy deepened as illness took hold. In his final years, Hemsley was diagnosed with lung cancer, which progressed into superior vena cava syndrome, restricting blood flow and accelerating physical decline. As his health failed, public appearances stopped entirely, and the man who once commanded the screen withdrew into silence. He died on July 24, 2012, at 74, at his home in El Paso, Texas, from superior vena cava syndrome associated with lung and bronchial carcinomas. Legal disputes over his estate delayed burial for months before he was finally laid to rest with military honors at Fort Bliss National Cemetery. At the time of his death, his estate was valued at approximately $3 million, the result of decades of television success, managed with restraint and privacy. Zara Cully as Olivia Mother Jefferson. Zara Cully was born on January 26, 1892, in Worcester, Massachusetts. At 83 years old, she played Olivia Mother Jefferson, the formidable matriarch whose blunt authority unsettled every room in The Jeffersons. Her presence injected generational weight into the series, turning humor into confrontation and age into power. That authority mirrored a life built on structure. Cully married James M. Brown Sr. in 1914, and together they raised 4 children in a long, stable marriage that lasted until his death in 1968. While family life remained consistent, her professional world demanded resilience, moving from decades of stage work and teaching into late-life television roles that carried social risk as well as visibility. Illness interrupted even that late momentum. During her run on The Jeffersons, Cully suffered a collapsed lung and severe pneumonia, forcing extended absences before returning to complete her final episodes. Soon after, she was diagnosed with lung cancer, an illness compounded by years of smoking and age-related decline. She died on February 28, 1978, at 86, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, from lung cancer. Services were attended by cast and creators, and she was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Glendale, Freedom Mausoleum. At the time of her death, her estate was estimated at $200,000, a modest sum set against a half-century career that proved influence does not depend on longevity alone, but timing and force. Marla Gibbs as Florence Johnston. Marla Gibbs was born on June 14, 1931, in Chicago, Illinois. At 44 years old, she played Florence Johnston, the razor-tongued maid whose timing and nerve cut straight through power, in The Jeffersons. Her fearless sarcasm became a pressure valve for the show, turning class tension into punchlines that kept scenes moving and audiences leaning in. That sharp confidence arrived after a private reset. Gibbs married her high school sweetheart Jordan Gibbs in 1955, had 3 children, Angela, Dorian, and Joseph, and divorced in 1973, just before her breakthrough. The split left her raising a family alone while starting over professionally, translating discipline from years of steady work into performances that felt earned rather than flashy. Health demanded its own vigilance. Gibbs has managed hypertension, adjusting pace and routine without retreating from work. As proof of that balance, she carried momentum beyond The Jeffersons into leadership on 227, then returned for selective appearances that underscored longevity rather than nostalgia. Today, Gibbs is 95 years old and remains active through public conversations, producing, and community work. Her estimated $4 million net worth reflects decades of acting, producing, and a successful jazz restaurant venture. Income built slowly, protected carefully, and sustained by choice rather than burnout. Roxy Roker as Helen Willis. Roxy Roker was born on August 28, 1929, in Miami, Florida. At 46 years old, she played Helen Willis, the poised neighbor whose interracial marriage confronted viewers with reality, in The Jeffersons. The role expanded the show's reach, placing calm conviction at the center of conversations television rarely held at the time. That composure carried weight at home. Roker married television producer Cy Kravitz in 1962 and became the mother of Lenny Kravitz. But diverging careers and expectations strained the marriage, ending in divorce in 1985. She narrowed her focus to parenting, choosing stability for her son while continuing to work with measured selectivity. Illness reshaped those plans. Roker was diagnosed with breast cancer, fighting through advanced stages while keeping her professional commitments modest. Performances during this period stood less as ambition than as continuity. Finally, she died on December 2, 1995, at 66 in Los Angeles from breast cancer. Roker was laid to rest privately, leaving an estate estimated at $500,000, drawn from steady acting work and family legacy. Finite resources, but a cultural imprint that far exceeded the numbers. Franklin Cover as Tom Willis. Franklin Cover was born on November 20, 1928, in Cleveland, Ohio. At 47 years old, he played Tom Willis, the thoughtful white husband in one of Primetime's first interracial marriages, in The Jeffersons. His restraint and moral steadiness softened confrontation, allowing the show to explore race through everyday domestic friction rather than speeches. That composure extended into his private life. Cover married Mary Bradford Stone in 1965, and together they raised 2 children, sustaining a stable marriage even as public reaction to his role brought scrutiny. While navigating that pressure, he leaned on classical training and stage discipline, keeping his work grounded as he moved between television and film. Age eventually narrowed his pace. By late 2005, Cover was recovering from a heart condition at the Lillian Booth Actors Home in New Jersey, where diminished immunity left him vulnerable. His final years reflected continuity rather than retreat, with earlier screen work, such as appearances in The Stepford Wives and later supporting roles, standing as evidence of a career built on reliability. Sadly, he died on February 5, 2006, at 77, in Englewood, New Jersey, from pneumonia. Cover was remembered quietly by family and colleagues, leaving an estimated $1 million net worth earned through steady acting and prudent investments. Paul Benedict as Harry Bentley. Paul Benedict was born on September 17, 1938, in Silver City, New Mexico. At 37 years old, he played Harry Bentley, the prim, verbose British neighbor whose politeness masked loneliness, in The Jeffersons. The character's eccentric calm countered the show's volatility, turning irritation into slow-burning humor. That detachment mirrored Benedict's personal boundaries. He never married, had no children, and lived privately while building a career across television and film. Work provided structure, from his long association with children's programming to ensemble comedies that relied on his timing rather than vanity. Health, however, shaped both body and presence. Benedict lived with acromegaly, a hormonal disorder that altered his appearance and carried long-term risks. He continued working despite the condition, later appearing in films like Waiting for Guffman, where understatement again became his strength. Finally, he died on December 1, 2008, at 70, in Aquinnah, Massachusetts, from a cerebral hemorrhage. Benedict's estate was estimated at $2 million, accumulated through decades of acting and theater work. After his death, his contributions were honored by peers who recognized a career defined by persistence and precision rather than noise. Damon Evans as Lionel Jefferson. Damon Evans was born on November 24, 1949, in Baltimore, Maryland. At 26 years old, he played Lionel Jefferson, the thoughtful, soft-spoken son who briefly replaced the original actor, in The Jeffersons. His version of Lionel leaned inward, easing conflict through restraint and intelligence rather than confrontation. That restraint came from deep artistic discipline. Trained in opera and classical theater, Evans moved fluidly between Broadway and off-Broadway, carrying musical rigor into every role. While television gave him visibility, the stage remained his center of gravity, with major work in productions like Jesus Christ Superstar and later The Lion King, where control and voice mattered more than fame. Personal life demanded a different kind of courage. Evans is openly gay and was present at the 1969 Stonewall riots, experiences that shaped his insistence on honesty even when the industry was not ready. Years later, he spoke publicly about the private cost of secrecy within his circle, revealing how silence weighed on friendships and careers alike. Now, Evans is 77 years old and continues to live largely outside the spotlight, respected more for craft than celebrity. His estimated $500,000 net worth reflects a life devoted to theater, teaching, and selective work, income built on longevity and principle rather than mass exposure. J. Hammer as Alan Willis. J. Hammer was born on November 16, 1944, in San Francisco, California. At 34 years old, he played Alan Willis, the younger, more idealistic brother in the Willis family, in the Jeffersons. His presence expanded the family dynamic, adding generational contrast to the show's ongoing conversation about race and marriage. That role fit neatly into a career defined by endurance. Hammer became widely recognized for his long-running work on Guiding Light, where sustained storytelling demanded consistency rather than spectacle. Television provided stability, allowing him to build a career that favored routine and reliability over sudden peaks. Away from the screen, Hammer's personal life settled into structure. He married Deanie Nardi in 1990, and together they raised 2 children, balancing family life with steady professional commitments. Outside acting, he invested time in hospitality, co-owning and working at a New York bar for more than 2 decades, an extension of his preference for grounded, human-scale work. Today, Hammer is 82 years old and remains alive, largely retired from acting but connected to creative circles through writing and community life. His estimated $1 million net worth comes from decades of television work and practical business ventures, reflecting a career built quietly, without collapse or reinvention, sustained by continuity. Berlinda Tolbert as Jenny Willis. Berlinda Tolbert was born on November 4, 1949, in Charlotte, North Carolina. At 26 years old, she played Jenny Willis, the idealistic daughter in a groundbreaking interracial family in the Jeffersons. Jenny's optimism and moral clarity softened the show's sharp debates, giving younger viewers a bridge between conflict and hope. That calm presence was shaped by constant adjustment. Tolbert married journalist Bob Reed in 1979, forming a stable partnership that contrasted with the uncertainty of a career built on auditions and short-term contracts. Without children to anchor her schedule, she leaned fully into work, carrying momentum beyond the sitcom into demanding film projects such as Harlem Nights and Goodfellas, roles that proved her range beyond television comedy. Health never forced her into retreat, but balance became essential. Tolbert managed the pressures of a long acting life by pacing herself, stepping in and out of the spotlight while later television work, including appearances on 6 Feet Under, signaled endurance rather than reinvention. The strategy preserved both longevity and control. Today, Tolbert is 77 years old and remains alive, selective, and respected, occasionally engaging in public discussions about her career while largely living away from constant exposure. Her estimated $1 million net worth reflects steady earnings from film and television, modest, self-contained, and consistent with a life spent working rather than chasing acclaim. Ned Wertheimer as Ralph Hart. Ned Wertheimer was born on October 27, 1923, in Buffalo, New York. At 52 years old, he played Ralph Hart, the ever-present doorman whose dry persistence added texture and continuity in the Jeffersons. His small, repeat appearances stitched episodes together, turning a running gag into a familiar rhythm viewers expected. That steadiness carried into his private life. Wertheimer married Dr. Skine Uku, and their partnership remained stable even as his career leaned on guest roles and character work rather than stardom. He balanced the demands of television with a life built on travel, union service, and professional reliability, choices that favored longevity over noise. Health eventually slowed that pace. After a fall at his Burbank home in November 2012, Wertheimer never fully recovered, and reduced mobility left him vulnerable. He spent his final weeks in care while complications compounded, ending a career marked by consistency with an abrupt physical decline. He died on January 2, 2013, at 89, in Valley Village, Los Angeles, from complications following the fall. Remembered for decades of dependable work, including late-career film appearances, Wertheimer left an estimated $500,000 net worth, a modest sum aligned with a life devoted to craft rather than celebrity. Danny Wells as Charlie. Danny Wells was born on April 7, 1941, in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. At 34 years old, he played Charlie, the streetwise bartender whose backroom wisdom steadied the building, in The Jeffersons. Charlie's warmth and hard truths grounded the ensemble, turning a neighborhood bar into the show's unofficial confessional. That credibility grew from a working actor's grind. Wells built momentum across television and film, then pivoted into voice work, where timing mattered as much as presence. When he became Luigi on the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, the role broadened his reach beyond sitcom audiences, proving adaptability without abandoning character-driven craft. Health eventually tightened the margins. Wells battled cancer, continuing to work selectively as energy allowed while the disease advanced. The illness reframed priorities, narrowing focus from volume to meaning as he withdrew from the spotlight. He died on November 28, 2013, at 72, in Toronto, Ontario, from cancer. Wells was buried at Mount Sinai Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles, his headstone reading, "Keep 'em Laughing." His estimated $500,000 net worth reflected decades of steady television, film, and voice work, earned through consistency rather than spectacle. Ebony Smith as Jessica Jefferson. Ebony Smith was born on September 16, 1978, in Puerto Rico. At 6 years old, she played Jessica Jefferson, the youngest voice in the household, observing more than she spoke, in The Jeffersons. Her presence added continuity to later seasons, anchoring family scenes with a child's quiet perspective. That early exposure opened a disciplined path. Smith carried her craft forward into film while building skills behind the camera, later appearing in projects tied to action franchises and developing her voice as a composer, a dual track that favored control over visibility. Balance mattered as roles shifted. Smith paced her choices, supplementing performance with formal training in film production and Chinese language and culture, a strategy that kept creative options open without chasing constant screen time. Today, Smith is 48 years old and remains active across acting and music, working selectively while maintaining privacy. Her estimated $500,000 net worth reflects diversified creative income, measured growth shaped by longevity rather than early fame. Ernest Hardin, Jr. as Marcus Henderson. Ernest Hardin, Jr. was born on November 25, 1952, in Detroit, Michigan. At 25 years old, he played Marcus Henderson, a troubled young man searching for direction, in The Jeffersons during seasons 3 and 4. The role mattered because Marcus was not a punchline. His arc gave the series a rare chance to slow down and explore redemption through guidance rather than punishment. That depth came through a carefully written relationship. Marcus first appeared as a thief who stole from George Jefferson's store, but instead of being discarded, he was pulled into conversation. As George recognized shared wounds, especially the absence of a father, the storyline shifted from crime to mentorship, allowing Hardin to portray gradual change, hesitation, and earned trust. The performance stood out precisely because it resisted easy resolution. Off the show, Hardin built a career defined by steady character work rather than visibility. He appeared across decades in television and film, including Hill Street Blues, The Steve Harvey Show, and later White Men Can't Jump, often cast as men carrying social weight beneath casual surfaces. The pattern echoed Marcus Henderson. flawed figures shaped by environment, not caricature. Today, Hardin Jr. is 73 years old and still works selectively as an actor and producer while keeping a low public profile. His estimated $200,000 net worth reflects a long working life in supporting roles. Income built through persistence, not stardom, much like the characters who defined his most memorable work. Time has a way of changing faces, but it also reveals what fame leaves behind. From shocking transformations to quiet disappearances, the lives of the Jeffersons cast took turns no one expected. Which transformation made you gasp the most? Let us know in the comments, and if you want more, then versus now, stories that uncover what really happened, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.